So, Mr. Secretary, you will be releasing that full video.
We are reviewing it right now.
Is that a yes or no?
That is, the most important thing to me are the ongoing operations in the Caribbean with our folks that use bespoke capabilities, techniques, procedures in the process. I'm way more interested in protecting that than anything else. So reviewing the process and we'll see.
Well, the video, who would want to see that video? That September 2nd video with, the possible war crimes in there. What's up, guys? Welcome to a long overdue Rescue Michigan live stream. And yeah, it's been a while, but we have Dennis Marburger joining us. How's it going, man? How you been?
I'm doing very well, Adam. Thank you for the invitation. It's great to be with you. How are you?
I'm well, but your mic kind of cut in and out there for a second. So just make sure when you're speaking, you kind of keep close to your microphone, because there might be like a noise gate or something on it. And when you step away from your microphone, it your voice kind of disappears like that. So just to give you the heads up on that.
Thanks. I'll lean into it.
All right, there you go. But yeah, I was out of town visiting my family for Thanksgiving. And then while I was gone, one of my dogs got a terrible injury on his hind paw, and he's still recovering from that. So that's just kind of thrown me for a loop for the last.
Oh no,
he'll be okay. The vet says we'll see. It's got a huge gash in his paw. It really looks awful. But I don't know what happened because I was out of town. But the house sitter was being very I don't know what the word is, patchy with the explanation of how this happened. So, but just have to give him antibiotics and hope for the best, I guess. Anyway, it's been a very turbulent past 3 weeks since I've been gone. A lot of stuff has happened we got to talk about. But the reason why I wanted to invite you on is actually because you've been really pushing at the Republican Party level for a while to get a resolution passed to kind of really uphold the America First principles. And I understand you kind of got it passed. It got defeated at the district party level, but then passed at the state party level. So I can read it to you, but I've got the resolution. But why don't you kind of set the table for us and tell us what this was all about?
Okay, thanks, Adam. Yes, so there were a couple things driving this. One is our long-standing and continuing initiative to promote the cause of liberty here in America. So that's a big part of this. And then a number of weeks ago, Senator Tim Kaine from Virginia on the floor of the Senate asserted that our rights don't come from God, but they are essentially gifts or privileges granted by government.
Yeah. This was the same Tim Kaine that was Hillary Clinton's running mate in 2016, as I recall.
Yes, birds of a feather, right? Yeah. So, and of course, he's totally wrong about this, and it's totally contradictory to the principles of the Declaration of Independence and to any sort of idea that you could have a free society if that were to be the case. And then there's the historical irony that he's from the state of Virginia, the Commonwealth of Virginia, the home of James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, George Mason, Patrick Henry, the Randolphs, the Lees. I mean, the whole thing is, And then, of course, there was the tragic and horrific assassination of Charlie Kirk, which occurred, I think, soon after that. And that's a situation which is still up in the air in terms of just exactly what happened. I know a lot of people are opining and investigating. And
yeah, I think that might be too much for us to talk about tonight because there's been a lot of drama going on the internet about this.
Right. But the thing about the reason I brought this up was that Charlie Kirk, of course, stood up for things like freedom of speech. He was very adamant about that, right?
Yes, he was.
Including speech he disagreed with, so he would go out and meet with people. I mean, he was really a very admirable and exemplary and a standout individual in his ability to have dialogue back and forth. And I think the general practice was he would just have dialogue with people, and he was willing to talk to anybody about various things, right? But we've seen over a long period of time, and it's happened since his assassination, efforts at curbing freedom of speech. And we've seen a number of initiatives on the part of federal and state governments to curb American freedoms. And we've also seen a rising tide of opinion, not only from Senator Kaine, but from others that would say, well, as an American citizen, you have this right, or as an American citizen, you have that right. But as Judge Napolitan and others pointed out, I mean, many have, then of course the natural law philosophers pointed this out, we're made in God's image. God is free. Therefore, since he made us in his image, we are free. We are naturally free. And in, for instance, the Bill of Rights, when they talk about freedom of speech, they mention the freedom of speech, a pre-existing freedom. And the Declaration of Independence, of course, famously says that all men are created equal, and our rights are granted to us, our liberty is granted to us by our Creator.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought this was a particularly important time to emphasize that point. So the resolution references those items about Senator Kane's assertions and about the tragic atrocity of the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and then urged Republicans to endorse the idea that our elected officials, Republican in other words, but particularly Republicans, because we're on the Michigan Republican State Committee and on the 11th Congressional District Committee, that they reject all attempts by the federal or state governments to violate rights, to violate freedom of speech, to make our rights and our ability to conduct a business and things of that nature dependent upon submission to a government, whether it's domestic or foreign, things of that nature. It also references the Epstein files in here, because that, of course, is going on at the same time, and is still a huge issue. But as this was happening, of course, Congressman Massey and Congressman Ro Khanna, I think, were leading the fight, and then Marjorie Taylor Greene joined, and eventually they all joined in.
Yeah, well, because they had to. But we should talk about that too, because I think that's been what happened since the last time I had a stream, was that there was the vote on releasing the Epstein files. And by the way, hey, Mark, Ashley Price, hey, Suede Leather, we see you guys in the chat there. Thanks for joining us tonight. Mark gives you the thumbs up, Dennis, for the work you're doing in the GOP. But yeah, let's get back to this topic, because this resolution, and maybe I should read it as it was passed, or I don't know if you want to kind of set the table more, because this has gone through a few different version changes, but some of these things are not entirely uncontroversial within the Republican Party. In fact, maybe we should. So would you mind if I read this real quick?
You may, or I may, whoever you'd like to read is fine.
Well, it's your document. Why don't you read it to me then, since it's in your writing, and
Okay.
this is the version that was actually adopted. Is that correct?
With one change.
Okay. All right. Well, why don't you read it first, and then we'll explain what the change is.
Okay.
All right.
Michigan Republican State Committee resolution protecting American rights through the oath of office, and a couple other people were involved for some of the details on a couple things, but and to keep it a one-page thing, that's what our chairman of our committee likes. Whereas we recognize that our rights are granted by God, as articulated by the Declaration of Independence, contrary to the assertion of Democratic Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, and whereas the ratified Constitution, which our elected officials take an oath to uphold, limits the authority of federal employees to that which was delegated to them by the people of the states. And whereas the Bill of Rights forbids federal assaults on the rights to free speech, dissent, seeking redress of grievance, privacy, gun ownership, free association, etc., for all persons, which is in quotation marks there.
Yeah.
And that was the one change that was voted out. And so they put in American citizens, but I think that was a mistake, and I'll explain why.
Yes.
And whereas the late martyred Charlie Kirk spoke out bravely in defense of those rights, now be it resolved, because politicians have intensified their attacks on our liberty, even in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination, the Michigan Republican State Committee calls on elected Republicans in Lansing and Washington, D.C. to, number one, reject all attempts by the federal and or state governments to outlaw speech, including speech critical of any government, whether foreign or domestic, and two, reject all attempts by the federal and or state governments to censor news media, social media, or any other media on behalf of governments, whether foreign or domestic, and three, reject all attempts by the federal and or state governments to make any commercial or governmental interactions, such as disaster aid or passports, dependent on submission to any government, whether foreign or domestic, and four, reject all attempts to keep the Epstein files hidden from the American people, and to sign the bipartisan congressional petition to release the Epstein files, enabling justice for the hundreds of victims and justice applied to the perpetrators, and five, fulfill their oath to uphold their respective constitutions and not vote for any legislation that violates either the Michigan or federal constitution, and be it further resolved upon adoption.
And then we're going to we'll tell everyone that we passed this. Is basically the end of it.
Right.
But that's actually, I mean, that's quite a lot. So let's kind of go through this. So first off, the right to free speech, and you start by saying we recognize our rights granted by God. It should be said, even people that don't believe in a higher power, there is such a thing as the natural law, which the framers also understood, which is that you have an inherent right to free speech. You have an inherent right to think for yourself. You have an inherent right to self-defense, and that the Bill of Rights is to protect these rights, not to create them, but to protect them. And this is germane for a number of reasons, not the least being that first of all, the Democrats in Lansing passed bills to attack free speech, including the so-called conversion therapy ban, which is an assault on the free practice of medicine. But also at the federal level, there have been assaults on free speech, in particular for people criticizing the genocide in Gaza, and that's been very viciously applied against some non-citizens. And that, I guess, is maybe where we got to this argument with, and why don't you explain that this issue that came up with the state committee?
Okay, the resolution was, I believe, it was unanimously adopted. I don't think anybody voted no after they made this one change.
Okay,
which was to take out all persons, but put in American citizens, and a young lady rose to object to all persons, because this might include, she said, illegal aliens. And then, so I responded that when the way the Bill of Rights is written and the way the Declaration of Independence is written, the way these things are set up, they didn't carve out that, again, as you say, they weren't saying we're granting rights to anybody, or this is just for citizens. They didn't provide, they didn't.
I'm trying to show this thing on the screen, but I don't know if I can make it big enough.
Okay. I sent you an email that actually has it as an attachment. I don't know if you saw that. But,
you did. Okay, I'll try to find it then.
Okay. So anyway, so the other points that, and then somebody else stood up and after I talked about all this and how this was very important, and these are really foundational American principles, said, well, we know that they're supposed to work for us as citizens and all that, and I probably fumbled the ball because I might have responded to it, but I thought I had my say, but I probably, what I might have said and should have said, why this is also dangerous, besides being historically inaccurate to say American citizens only. We have lots of people who are here legally, and without even getting into the issue of something we talked about once in the past, but was immigration never delegated to the feds? But anyway, aside from that, even if you say, well, it's fine that they have laws on this, there are obviously lots of people that come here that are here legal without any violation of any immigration law. And there are people that might be visiting, and there are people, as somebody told me afterwards, who's on the state committee. This fellow says he really appreciated I staked out this ground, and he said, his wife had just been naturalized as a citizen. He says, so are these other people saying that she had no rights, that she didn't have rights before she was initially? Okay.
The idea that non-citizens have no rights at all, like, okay, illegals don't have the right to be here, and that's kind of the end of it. But besides that, I mean, you don't lose your right to free speech just because you're a guest in this country.
Right. And I'd like to make a point about that, because as you referenced, I think you were referencing this, we have at least two cases that I can recall.
Yeah.
Of people who were here, and there was no insinuation that they had violated any immigration laws or anything else, frankly.
No, in fact, quite the contrary. The one from University of Michigan, I believe, when they deported him, they actually said it was specifically because he supported Gaza and Palestine.
Right. And
it was precisely his speech. It was not because he broke the law or agitated for anything. It was precisely because of his free speech that they deported him.
Right. Which is governmental corruption. And violation of the supreme law of the land.
Yeah. So, by the way, I think that case is still playing out in the courts. I'm not sure where it is now, but I think they're still fighting on that one.
Right. And the other, there were two others that from the East Coast that I recall. One, a lady of Turkish descent who was here, and was with a group of students who wrote an op-ed in a paper in Boston. I think she's a student at Tufts University, and she was accosted, and federal agents and subjected to, I think she was arrested, as I recall, but there was no violation of law by her of any type. And then, of course, there was maybe a more well-known, a more famous one several months ago. I believe the gentleman's name is Muhammad Khalil at Columbia University, right? And it wasn't even that he was a visa. He had a green card, and he was working on his way to get citizenship, and he was following along with the rules. Yeah, his wife is a citizen.
Yeah.
And pregnant, and so what ended up happening was she ended up giving birth to their child while he was incarcerated. But there was as Glenn Greenwald and others have pointed out, he was never charged with any crime. So this actually, a lot of what was going on here is reminiscent of the fight we had. Well, you'll remember these old days, Adam, 2011, 2012, over the National Defense Authorization indefinite detention provisions.
Yeah.
Right. And so what they said, the thing Obama signed on New Year's Eve, as I recall, was that if the president were to designate you a terrorist, you could be indefinitely incarcerated without charge or trial. And so that's what happened to this fellow. And
now apparently you can just be murdered on the high seas. Apparently the way that works. But
right.
And to that point, you know, it's frustrating because on one hand, there are certain things where I think the courts are impeding the Trump administration's ability to do the right thing when it comes to deporting illegal aliens and members of Trend Agua and these other human trafficking gangs, where the fact that they're also engaging in the deportation for speech cases are making the whole issue a lot more difficult and a lot cloudier in the courts, and where there's, you know, judges would be normally, I think, maybe the Supreme Court might even be inclined to say, you know what, we really do have a big problem with these rogue district judges. But at the same time, they're also very concerned about the Trump administration taking things too far as well and not wanting to remove their ability to put the brakes on things. Because go ahead.
Well, right. And then, you know, there is the other possibility that could happen. And I thought of it again. I should have brought it up yesterday during the meeting and I didn't, but I mentioned to a couple of people after we had adjourned. I guess it was too late then, but I said, you know, so now, in other words, if your political activism angers people in Washington, let's say that the next Democratic administration, what if they say, you know what we're going to do? You're a terrorist, and we're going to revoke your citizenship, even if you're naturally born. And you might say, well, that born here. Now that seems unlikely at the moment, but we can see how radically these things can change with shifts in the wind. Yeah. And so if we say you're right,
I'm not very optimistic that Republicans will hold power for very much longer.
Right. So it really, I think, was a very short-sighted thing. You know, in retrospect, maybe I should have just left the phrase "all persons out," and then this wouldn't come up as a controversy, and then they wouldn't have put in the thing about citizens, American citizens. But again,
I think what's remarkable about the document is that in multiple ways, it implicitly criticizes the Trump administration. First, for some of the attacks on free speech, and also, of course, for the knuckle dragging on releasing the Epstein documents, which the only reason that Trump flipped on that was because he knew they had the votes to pass it, which is fine, you know, but the damage has been done. And for what purpose? It's so embarrassing. You know, it boggles my mind that it's now December. We're almost a full year into this administration. And before Trump got elected, nobody was thinking about, let's have a war with Venezuela. Nobody was thinking we're going to have issues with free speech on campus again. Like, those are the things that are supposed to be easily put to bed, and let's move on to, you know, rebuilding the homeland. And instead we get things like, well, the new national security document, which is another topic I want to talk about tonight. But before we move past that, was there other elements of this that you wanted to go over? Because I know that this did pass the state committee, although it was telling that I guess there was some issue with them even knowing. I saw someone posted on X that or maybe it was on Facebook, I saw, where there was some dispute at the meeting that people didn't know which version had actually been voted on and passed.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, there was a vote for there to be an amendment in the language of striking all persons and putting in American citizens. And then it went through unanimously.
Okay.
After that, and like I say, maybe I should have just left that out. I think it's an important concept, but in retrospect, it'd be better to have left it blank than have it to say American citizens, because that's just not factually true. Nor would we want it to be that way, really. But you know,
I think even still, the point was made.
Right, and there was a lot of you know, support for this. There was some also discussion about, well, you know, the Epstein thing, is that passed? But interestingly, as people discussed it in our issue subcommittee, and also I think discussing it on the floor with people, a lot of people say, yeah, we want to know what's going on with that. And so I saw it as generally a hopeful sign in terms of the way most of the people responded to it. And as you say, well, it implicitly would criticize the Trump administration on some of these things. it's also meant to be. I mean, really, I think a more universalist approach. Yeah, that's the current administration, but we were talking about stuff like this with previous administrations, and when they were Democrats, right? And you know about a lot of the fights that we were involved with in those days, and so.
Oh, here, Patty just chimed in. She said the unknown vote was by the hand count, not the resolution. So something else.
Oh, okay. All right. Hi, Patty. Yeah, she was there. So her and Matt, and of course, Matt was doing his usual excellent work, explaining not on this, but on some other topics that we're procedural type things that were being discussed. So anyway, that was that, so it was a couple of good steps forward. I believe that we did this, and that maybe people are at least the topic came up, and maybe I'll send something around to folks to explain why this was the idea that these documents were clear in that our rights are pre-existing the establishment of any government, and your rights are not dependent on any political privilege or permission or status of being a citizen.
Yeah.
So
wasn't there another resolution they're talking about to assert the rights of precinct delegates or something? Did anything happen with that?
Okay, that was not a part of the official agenda.
Okay.
It was requested to be put, and it never did. And we had an action-packed, as Patty and others who were there will attest. We had a full action-packed session over at the church in Sterling Heights. I think it was Community Christian Church. A really very impressive facility they had over there.
Cool. Well, do you want to move on to some other topics, or was there more we want to talk about with this resolution? Because I did want to also talk about this whole Venezuela thing. And
absolutely, no, I think we've covered this. But again, I want to say I think generally it's a very positive thing with the one what I see now as the one defect that was added to it. But it's good that the people are considering all these different things and
yeah, and I think it's important, especially because things that should not be controversial in the party, like free speech, or even, I mean, I what in the world they were thinking trying to block the Epstein documents disclosure, it boggles my mind. But hey, what are they thinking about Venezuela?
Right. Oh, excuse me.
On that note, go ahead, Dennis. You want to say something?
Sorry. Yeah. So one last thing. Yeah, it did come up, and even I should recognize that somebody who stood up, the second person who spoke in favor of making it American citizens, when we were in our issues subcommittee, I mean, he did make the point, and I thought it was a very good one, about the Epstein thing. He says, because I said, apparently a couple of people said, well, they already had that vote. And I said, well, yeah, events. And as our chairman said, well, we only meet, every so often. So yeah, sometimes events will leapfrog what we've written. And I said, but, and this really isn't done yet. It's not all finished. And this other person said, yeah, he said, I want to know the whole thing. So I said, that's really good that we have that in there. He said, let's keep it like it is. And everybody agreed. So that was
good.
Very good.
Well, excellent. Well, so the other thing is, and I feel like any day we're about to attack Venezuela on land, and it's just, it hasn't happened yet. I've been feeling that in my gut for some weeks now, but I can't imagine. I mean, I want, I want the Trump administration to reconsider this, and like, hopefully this blow up over Pete Hegseth, which we can talk about also, might be a cautionary tale that maybe going to war with Venezuela is not a good idea. It might not be as easy as the administration seems to think. But at the same time, I have to say, I have a hard time believing that with all these boats in the water around the shore of Venezuela and the satellites in the air doing recon and picking out targets, there's no way this isn't going to happen, and not going to happen soon. And what's so crazy, I mean, the craziest thing of all, I think, was that, and this has happened since the last show we did, was that Trump just recently pardoned a drug dealer, the former president of Honduras, who was convicted of being involved in this scheme to bring in 400 tons of cocaine into the United States at the same time the Trump administration is claiming that we're going to war with Venezuela because of drugs. And at least we can put this story up here on the screen. It's almost like, in case any of you out there really think this has anything to do with drugs, let me prove to you it's not. And then they run this story. So here's the guy. Can I make this any bigger? Walked free after Trump pardoned him. A man once characterized as the key figure in a drug trafficking scheme that flooded America with over 400 tons of cocaine. Sentenced to 45 years in prison. Trump claimed he was treated very harshly and unfairly. You mean how? What does that even mean? Oh, you mean prison conditions are harsh? Is that news? Does he think that he wasn't involved in this? I mean, because they had a whole trial about this. U.S. federal prosecutors accused him of accepting a $1 million bribe from El Chapo in his first term in exchange for protecting narcotics routes through Honduras. So there was all of that. And then also, I don't know if you guys saw this, but this just happened a couple of days ago. Here is President Trump here at the FIFA. You see Trump there with who's that sitting right next to him? Claudia Sheinbaum, the president of Mexico, where all the so while Trump is partying with Sheinbaum, by the way, that's an ancient Aztec bloodline, the Scheinbaums in Mexico. Sheinbaum and what's the guy's name? Juan Orlando Hernandez, the drug smuggling cocaine trafficker. He's pardoning them, but we're gonna invade Venezuela to go after drugs. It's almost so sick you want to puke, but then you want to laugh because it's so outrageous.
Right. Well, and as some people point out, and again, I mean, a number have been on this story talking about the absurdities of it. Glenn Greenwald, in particular, he said if people think they're smuggling fentanyl in from Venezuela in these boats, it's idiotic. It's a lie, and they were, and they showed how that was.
Do you know how far away Venezuela is from the United States? Like the whole notion. And getting back to that clip we had in the cold open. So this has become a big problem for Pete Hegseth, and the Republicans seem unanimously convinced that there's nothing to this. Like, why would anybody think Pete Hegseth, the guy who you can almost see him with his cock in his hand, jacking it as he's talking about killing these drug dealers, or did anybody think he's a war criminal? Like, get real. I'm sorry to be vulgar about this, but the guy's almost a cartoon character. All he does is talk about American military might, and we're gonna make those bad guys shaking their boots, and they're not going to be able to dream about attacking America and da-da-da-da-da. And I mean, one could argue that all of the drone bombings of these boats have been war crimes, but the big issue is that absolutely no question a double tap would be. And maybe we should explain for some of the people in the audience why that's a war crime, because apparently people don't know that when you are in a war, yes, your objective is not technically to kill the other side. It is to protect yourself by destroying their ability to attack you. And in self-defense law, like personal self-defense law, what that means is, you can use deadly force against an immediate deadly threat to your person. But once that person has been disarmed, once that person has literally, imagine they're laying on the ground bleeding, you can't just point the gun right at their forehead and pull the trigger to put them down dead. Because once they are no longer a threat to you, now you're not defending yourself. Now it's murder. And in war, obviously a military has a duty first to its country. So it's not like it has to drop what it's doing to protect the people on the other side who have been wounded. They don't have that kind of responsibility. But war crimes come into effect when you are gratuitously murdering unarmed members of the other side. Right. And not to mention the fact that there's no declaration of war at all. We're just committing extrajudicial killings of these people who might not even be Venezuelans, let alone drug dealers, let alone war combatants.
Well, right. In fact, by the way, I wanted to talk about the declaration of war aspect to this, or lack thereof. But also, somebody made an interesting point, and I should have saved it, and I didn't. But they said they thought that some of these people that are on these boats may actually have been victims of human trafficking and were forced to participate in this, whatever was going on those boats. I mean,
who would know? That's why you apprehend people.
Right. So there's been no trial. There's been no. But here's the other thing. Well, first of all, this notion that we're supposed to just trust what we hear from a government official. Hey, trust us. This is what's going on. I mean, that's people that have been asleep and not been paying attention for what's happened in all of our adult lifetimes, and even before that, with the number of lies that come from government officials, and even said, well, yeah, but they were appointed by the political party that's our marketing label. Nobody would suggest that we should do that if they have any sense. And historically, we know they shouldn't. And even at the beginning, of the formation of American governance. They debated, they argued over that, and the idea of trust. And trust in government was seen as being one of the most corrosive things to liberty and to life that would be possible. And there was a fellow apparently at the Massachusetts Ratifying Convention named Abraham White, who said as they're arguing about this, should they ratify the Constitution? And the anti-ratification group said, no, it's going to make too powerful of a government. Some people, so you can trust us. And he said, I wouldn't trust a flock of Moses. And obviously we haven't come anywhere close to having a group of Moses in government, and you never would. And there's many others who said the same thing, that the natural inclination of people who get some form of political power is to try to get more. And we have so many examples of being lied to into wars and into other expansions of government, that the idea that we would just take somebody's word for it is beyond the pale. But on top of that, as you pointed out, there's been no declaration of war for doing this, and no free people would allow the executive. And again, this was something that they argued about vociferously, and James Madison, among others, was they all agreed that would be a terrible idea to have the president be able to say, you know what, I'm going to kill some people, so I'm just going to do that. No, even before the Barbary Pirates, where Jefferson went to Congress, okay, so we can put that one to bed right now, he didn't just launch military activity. He said, well, this is what I think should be done about it, and here are the facts, but you're the Congress, you've got to decide this. And he actually was a little more hawkish on this than was John Adams, which is kind of interesting. I think Adams was one of those that said, well, let's just pay the guy wanted the tribute, let's just pay the tribute. And then Jefferson said, well, they're likely to just raise it on us, and whatever, we shouldn't be doing that anyway. But okay, Congress, now what should we do? And they got some of our people over there. And so he didn't just go and attack on his own without asking Congress. He went, and Congress authorized it. There were other examples too, where I think Adams, I believe, one of them had when the president was there, and there were like 300 sailors, I think it was, that had been captured by a foreign power. But before they did anything, he went to Congress and said, what should we do? Before that, Washington, apparently one of the earliest examples of this is on this continent. There were Indian tribes that were attacking some of the Western settlements, actual attacks. And then Washington told the people that were there in the forts and the military commanders, okay, you are authorized for defense, but not to chase and launch attacks until we get authorization from the Congress as to what to do. I mean, there are many examples of this, and they were quite clear about it. And one of the reasons they were is because they knew that when the thing that's going to really grow government is going to be war, very, very key aspect of that, and that there's going to be the temptation to launch acts of war without authorization if we don't force the people who take the oath of office to obey the oath, to obey the law. And so ironically, in a society where the phrase law and order is so sacrosanct, we see a complete violation of law and order by the people who are the most high profile. And this has gone on for a very long period of time. This is not an innovation with Trump, but this Venezuelan boat situation maybe in some ways it's another step forward here, and on this thing, because I mean, frankly, even the drug war is not constitutionally authorized. They never passed an amendment like they did with alcohol prohibition, right? So that never came up. And you look in the Constitution, there's nothing about doing anything about these sort of things at the federal level. Nonetheless, there have been all sorts of things done, and we have found out, along with the Snowden revelations, we found out about the license plate trackers, which nobody knew about, and people in Congress were surprised. We've had, getting back to the war thing, we've even had with all these unauthorized deployments and actions, even that situation, if you remember, is tragically several, I think they were National Guards people from Georgia that were killed in, I believe it was Niger. And even Lindsey Graham, of all people, said, what, we have troops in Niger? So if Lindsey Graham didn't know, and he was shocked about it, you can admit, I mean, so we have a huge problem where there's runaway lawlessness on the part of government, on the part of Republicans and Democrats, including those that are in power now, that are usurping authority, usurping what was delegated to them. And St. George Tucker, who wrote the first systematic analysis of the Constitution in 1803, said if they take undelegated authority, that's a usurpation of power. And he said a usurpation of power is treason against the sovereignty of the people. But we've allowed this to go on for so long that now it's just considered commonplace. But as I said, even before independence was won, John Dickinson, the penman of the American Revolution, wrote during the Stamp Act that if we don't fight back against these sort of things, we don't stop them, we not only harm ourselves, but future generations who will look upon us with disdain because we let their freedom and their liberty disappear.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be. I mean, I think this is only the beginning of where this all goes with the with the real debate about whether or not anything that we're doing in Venezuela is lawful. But unfortunately, once again, the Trump administration has made this worse for itself because, again, like, you might be able to argue, it's at least arguable whether or not, attacking these boats is lawful. I don't think it is. I know you don't, but I'm sure many people think it is. But the double tap is going to be a festering problem. Here's what Tom Cotton says about it. This is someone who has presumably seen the video that we are somehow not allowed to see, even though you know how giddy Pete Hegseth is to post all those other videos of the boats being blown up, but somehow this one we don't get to see for some reason. So Tom Cotton says, the only reason the narco terrorists didn't flip their boat back over and continue their mission is because our military didn't give them the chance. So, yeah, the guy, I mean, just imagine, like, even if you're a drug smuggler in a cigarette boat that gets bombed by a U.S. military, probably a helicopter, I guess. I don't know, maybe a drone or something. You're thinking about continuing the mission when you've just been bombed by the U.S. military and most of your crew has been instantaneously vaporized. No, you're fighting to defend your life at that point. Your boat has been blown up. You are now in survival mode. That's a completely insane take. And the Republicans that are defending this have come up with all kinds of these insane takes. And the reality is, probably one of these days we're going to get to see this video. And it's going to look every bit as bad as the Democrats claim it has. Because of course it does. Because we see what kind of person Pete Hegseth is. And we know it's exactly what it's going to look like. Of course,
right. Right. And so, and again, the other thing about this, again, there's an accusation made, like after the fact, and people saying, oh, we got this great technology and look how we can kill and all this sort of thing. But none of that passes the smell test. None of that.
Here's another thing too. This is just, again, I hate to say this because this is not good for our side. But remember what else happened surrounding this whole story was that the Democrats, including Alyssa Slotkin, our senator, put out this video saying, and it was very carefully worded to just say, remember, American soldiers, don't obey an illegal order. And it was very carefully worded so that it was actually not explicitly calling for them to disobey a lawful order. It's like when you say, like if a lawmaker was to say, I promise I will never vote for something that's unconstitutional. Well, yeah, but that's because you don't think anything you're doing is unconstitutional. It's subject to interpretation in the future. If you're just telling soldiers don't obey an illegal order, and of course, eventually people found videos of even Republicans saying the same kind of thing.
That's said it.
Because of course of course you can't obey an illegal order. That's basic UCMJ stuff. But anyway, Republicans foolishly took the bait, and in fact, I think it went as far as Pete Hegseth putting out a statement saying, I'm calling for us to look into whether or not Mark Kelly broke the law, needs to be held accountable, and blah, blah, blah. And of course, this whole stunt was conceived by and vetted through lawyers. And the Democrats knew exactly what they were doing. They probably knew the scandal was coming. And the way it's all blown up in Republicans' faces, it's all unforced errors. Like, first of all, there's no reason to do any of this at all in the first place. If they didn't put Narco Marco in charge of state, there'd be no reason to be trying to attack Venezuela in the first place at all. But now it's gotten to this point where these are, I think, even cruder lies than the Bush administration had for invading Iraq, honestly, 20 years ago. Remember that they went to a lot of trouble with those. Colin Powell brought the fake anthrax out at the congressional hearings, and if we don't stop Saddam, we might wake up to the reality of the problem of terrorism in the form of a mushroom cloud and all this other BS. And but this one's just like, we're going to invade Venezuela because they're flooding our streets with fentanyl through boats that come from Caracas right to the coast of to the ports in Miami. Sure, I mean, just lunacy, just complete kookery.
Right. Well, yes, it is. And of course, back then it was Cheney too. And a lot of these people that were doing this and that sort of thing and just lying and in some ways wording it very carefully so they can say, well, we didn't say it was 100% sure, but they certainly implied it at the very least. I mean, so there's no doubt with what they were trying to pull off. And of course, we have examples of presidential extrajudicial killings of Americans, right? Not just of Venezuelans.
Yeah.
Right?
And I've seen a number of people try to bring up like, you didn't say anything when Obama drone bombed that America. It's like, yes, I did. Actually, I certainly did say a lot about that. That and his boy, actually, too. Yeah,
right,
Barack Obama murdered an American citizen and his child. That's true. That did happen. That was a war crime. Doesn't mean two wrongs make a right.
Right, exactly. In fact, as it turns out, as I recall, so he drone bombed Anwar al-Awlaki, who evidently said something, and he may have said something we'd all find objectionable, but yeah, getting back to the freedom of speech thing or whatever, say, and there certainly wasn't a trial, that said, oh yeah, this guy committed this crime, and so here's going to be the punishment for it because we have it right here in our law that we're going to follow. So they killed him, and then there was the drone death of his son, of this man's son, who was having a barbecue or cookout with somebody out in the Yemeni desert, and then later, do you remember this? The SEAL raid on Yemen, where they ended up killing. Presumably, I mean, this was not the intention, but they ended up killing the 8-year-old girl who was the survivor of the son and the father. And then she was killed. But we got these examples here at home, of course.
And you remember what Obama said too after that? Someone was asking about that, and he says, "Oh, he should have had a more responsible father."
Yeah. Well, Obama, or was it one of his aides that said that? But I do remember that. Yeah, was it Axelrod or somebody like that? Somebody made some. Yeah, some horrific comment like that. But and there are other examples. I mean, people can look at Waco and Ruby Ridge, and what happened there. And Bill Barr was involved as the Attorney General, if I remember this correctly, at Ruby Ridge, and at the beginning of Waco, and then the Elder Bush lost to Clinton, and so Janet Reno came in. But the Waco thing had started with Bill Barr, who I think the great James Bovard has written about this. How Barr then became, maybe it was when he was in private practice, or maybe when he was still Attorney General, he was promoting this doctrine that the FBI could kill you if they, and so he's sort of like a form of sovereign immunity for, like, is it Lon Haruchi? Was that the name of the sniper at?
Lon Haruchi.
Right, at Ruby Ridge and things like that. But also the things that Obama did with his drone killing. So the things that have happened from administration to administration to administration, this gets worse and worse, and it has included killings of Americans, and it has included killings of Americans by foreign governments, which in some cases, if they're considered a U.S. ally, even if there's not a treaty of alliance, our government will look the other way and say, "Oh well, we're not going to really bring that up." Yeah. So it actually is a life or death issue for us as well. If this government in Washington D.C. continues to violate its own rules, and the likelihood of them not doing that, unless there's massive political pressure put on them, would seem very low.
Yeah. Well, it has been, one thing after another. And one of the things that just happened is that Marjorie Taylor Greene has announced her early retirement from Congress, which, I think, well, I'll just say, I don't think quitting was the thing she should have done, but I can understand why she has. And she put out quite a statement when she announced her retirement, basically just saying there's no point even being here because we're just rubber stamping what the Trump administration tells us to do. And the way he attacked her was just unreal, I thought. As one of his most loyal supporters, she always was. And, Trump didn't hesitate, in just vicious personal attacks, so nasty that she's been receiving death threats and all that stuff. I get that she has a contract with her voters to complete her term, and I think maybe she should have, but at the same time, I don't know. I don't know if it's our place to tell a woman who's receiving death threats that she can't quit. But I think to the degree that she's quitting because she thinks she might do something more effective in the future, I doubt it. Things would be like Matt Gaetz. Remember, he quit Congress. He didn't have to quit Congress. He was blocked from becoming Attorney General, but he'd still won a new term in Congress. He could have stayed on in Congress. He chose to leave. Now he's a nobody. I mean, he's a podcaster, but that's the same thing as being a nobody. It really is. So it's very sad, and then you have to wonder. I mean, she talked about this.
and as you point out, we don't know all the facts of what was going on behind the scenes, or she's getting these death threats or their threats to family members, and trying to weigh all this stuff out. It's tragic. And in fact, I remember you and I talked the night this came out about how now the America First caucus in Congress has been cut in half. Now it's just Tom Massey rather than Tom Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene. So and now there was this attack that Trump made on Peter Schiff. I'm sure you saw that, where Peter Schiff was apparently on CNBC or somewhere. He's talking about the problems we have with affordability of things because of dollar debasement over a long period of time, which has been exacerbated by look, now we're not going to have Doge. Now we're not going to have an audit of Fort Knox Gold, but we're going to have wildly increased spending and continue to drive these deficits higher and higher. And also, along with some of these other factors that are playing into this, lead to de-dollarization and lead to a declining exchange rate for the dollar in many ways, including for the goods and services we buy. And people are noticing this at the grocery store and at restaurants and buying cars and insurance and that sort of thing. And so Peter Schiff's talking about it. And Trump apparently went ballistic and called him a jerk and a loser, put out, these posts about it. And so Schiff said, he's saying this about me. Yeah,
it's so amazing too, because Trump, he could be doing so much to attack his real political enemies and to change so one of the things that we didn't get to talk about this week, and probably won't because we're going to run out of time, but one of the big things that happened recently is this new national security document's really going hard after Europe in a very funny and amusing way, which is great. And of course, the Europeans are flipping out. And we know that when the inevitable defeat of Ukraine comes, they are going to blame Trump. And Trump should be laying that groundwork, saying, this whole war in Ukraine not just wasn't my fault, it was Biden's war, but, going into the details of how the United States under Joe Biden was forcing Russia into this position, arming these thugs, talking about the war crimes Ukraine committed, talking about all the money being stolen. Trump could be setting the stage for all the messaging that's going to have to come when this really comes after him. And instead, he's going after Peter Schiff over an interview on Fox and Marjorie Taylor Greene. He treats his friends worse than his enemies.
Well, and the way he's treated Rand Paul and Thomas Massey, who were, as Tom Woods points out, who were his most vociferous defenders during the Russiagate hoax. It was Rand Paul and Thomas Massey,
Yeah.
And as you say, and so what they're basically saying is, well, wait, let's stick to our agenda of, I thought we were going to reduce the size and scope of government, have fewer of these foreign entanglements, that sort of thing. But he attacks them much harder than he does. And he says, well, Lindsey Graham was always there with me. No, he wasn't. Lindsey Graham, was one of these people that was a never Trumper, and gave him real hard time. But as you point out, yes, what the Biden administration did, but not only that, and during the Obama administration, right, 2014, 15, 16, 17, and some of these people that again were very opposed to Trump when he was saying a lot of stuff that we would have agreed with on the foreign policy issues, and they were really that was really sort of the first invasion of Ukraine was when they decided when the president the democratically elected president said, well, I guess if you're going to make me choose between the European Economic Union and the Russian-oriented version, we'll go with that one because that's a better deal for us. And that's when all this stuff happened. And they sent in agents and they were doing terrible things, burning people alive and starting these riots. And Victoria Nuland's giving cookies to people if they would riot. And so that he should be talking about that. But, like Scott Horton's book.
There's any number of things Trump could be talking about because they're going to become big issues. Hold on, I want to read a couple of chats here. Patty P says Gates quit Congress before his attorney general nomination was pulled way too soon. Patty, as I recall, yes, that's true. However, that was the resignation from the term that he was currently serving. He still could have been sworn in for that term. He had still won because that didn't even begin until January of this year. He chose not to. Mark says, I wouldn't say both people got dinged by autocorrect, the spelling of Gates. Mark says, I wouldn't say Gates is a nobody. Everybody is a somebody. Most people have never won office at all. Mark, that's true. I know. And I don't mean the term just to say. But the point being, very, 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 very few Americans have the privilege of ever serving in Congress even once. And I've worked with lawmakers that some of them have even told me, the former ones, that when you are no longer a lawmaker, you realize how much extraordinary influence you actually have on things that you don't realize what you had until it was gone. And and being in Congress really is a rare privilege that almost nobody can get. Even the people that have a lot of money don't easily get to Congress. You have to have just the right set of circumstances to ever get there at all, and that's a rare thing. And being able to be on the House floor and being able to be the one who got rid of the Speaker of the House, for crying out loud. Matt Gaetz was one of the reasons we knocked out Kevin McCarthy, probably the reason Kevin McCarthy got knocked out. That's real power. He will never have that kind of power as a podcaster. And he is going to probably wish he was there if he isn't already. Now, that being said, the other thing I was going to say, talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene, is I've even talked to a state lawmaker, I won't say who, but someone that said, I don't know why I do this job. The pay is not worth it. The stress is unbelievable. We get nothing accomplished, really. I don't know why I'm here. It is difficult, frustrating work. It just is. And it's hard to stay in it, especially if you're being bullied and abused. And I think, you know, for Marjorie Taylor Greene to be attacked by Trump, who she staked her entire political reputation on, that was just so personally hurtful. And I can imagine she just gave into the frustration and the betrayal and just decided we had enough. Barry says, this is going back to earlier, it says, I don't think like a drug dude, meaning, I guess, Barry, I don't know, maybe you're more an expert than me, but I would just imagine if my boat was being blown to smithereens by the U.S. military, that my survival would be important. I don't know. Maybe that's just a thing. I think I want to survive, but I don't know. Maybe as they're clinging to the wreckage of their boat, they're reaching for that submachine gun to spray indiscriminately at the helicopter above them. Maybe that's happening. I don't think so, though. I think that's pretty far-fetched. So Mark also says term limits are what limited government's about. As a city charter commissioner, help bring term limits on city elected officials. Good for you, Mark. Appreciate it. He also says limited government is best, and Dennis was right on that point. So there you go. Anyway, it's almost back on almost the top of the hour again, Dennis. I don't know if you want to stay on. One of the things I meant to talk about tonight, but actually I think I'm going to do is save it for like a day or two. I've been 3 weeks of no streaming, and I've got stuff to catch up on. But one of the stories I was going to cover tonight is that an official complaint has been filed with the U.S. Department of Education over a boy playing on a girls' sports team in actually my neck of the woods at Skyline High School in Ann Arbor. A boy was on the girls' volleyball team. They got to the quarterfinals. However, I have the complaint in hand, but it's been embargoed until the news conference they're having tomorrow. So in lieu of going through that, let's do this. I will tell you guys you should come to the news conference if you're available. It's at the Monroe County Courthouse at 2:45 p.m. tomorrow, when the father of one of the victims, that is to say a girl on a girls' sports team, is going to be there. Some state lawmakers will be there and talking about this issue of boys invading girls' sports under the guise of being transgender. And then after that news conference and the complaint is out, maybe tomorrow night or Tuesday night, we can go through it. So again, that's tomorrow, 2:45 p.m. at the Monroe County Courthouse. So there's that announcement, and then we'll do a stream about that soon. So other than that, yeah, the other thing, Dennis, was we have this national security document that just dropped, which is basically Paul Wolfowitz all over again. It's just slightly different, but it's all about we need to rule the world. We need to contain China. We need Europe to do more to contain Russia. We need to assert our complete dominance over the Western Hemisphere. We will control who Brazil trades with. We will do all these things. But it's also supposedly a radical departure from the U.S. strategy beforehand. I don't know if I've read it that same way.
Well, it doesn't sound like it from the way you're describing it, Adam. And
well, it's 33 pages. I'm not going to go through it word by word, but well, here's page 1. This is Donald Trump's pub note to kind of kick things off here. And here's what he says. Over the past 9 months, we have brought our nation and the world back from the brink of catastrophe and disaster. I'm not sure I would agree. Over the 4 years of weakness and deadly extremism, deadly failures, that is true. My administration has moved with urgency and historic speed to restore American strength at home and abroad and bring peace and stability to our world. No administration in history has achieved so dramatic a turnaround in so short a time. Starting on my first day in office, we restored the sovereign borders of the United States and deployed the U.S. military to stop the invasion of our country. Okay, yes, that's good. Thank you, Trump, for securing the border. I will give him that. We got radical gender ideology and woke lunacy out of our armed forces and began strengthening the military with $1 trillion of investment. Well, $1 trillion of investment for a bigger military. So, yeah, we are retrenching with a huge military expansion. We built our alliances and got our allies to contribute more to our common defense, including a historic commitment from NATO countries to raise defense spending from 2% to 5% of GDP. Well, that's great, guys. Isn't that great? We got Europe to spend more money on their militaries too. Isn't that wonderful? More military spending for the whole world, for our allies, our allies, NATO, our allies. You're right. We unleashed American energy production to reclaim our independence and impose historic tariffs to bring critical industries back home. As you know, most of the tariffs I saw weren't even by industry; they were by country. In Operation Midnight Hammer, we obliterated Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity. Dead wrong. What we actually done is destroyed the IAEA's ability to monitor Iran's nuclear capabilities. So now we don't know what they have anymore. Great. I declared the drug cartels and savage foreign gangs operating in our region as foreign terrorist organizations, including, amusingly, by the way, one of those he designated was something called the Cartel of the Suns or the Cartel de los Sols, which there was a great article about this at this website, the iceman.substack.com. And this is it's a long article. I'm not going to read through it. But if you want to learn the whole history about the Cartel of the Suns, they were actually a CIA creation. So anyway, we designated those organizations, including the ones that we started, as terrorist organizations. In the course of just 8 months, we settled 8 raging conflicts, and then he lists them off, of course. Obviously, some staff had to help with the spelling of Azerbaijan and the name Armenia as opposed to Albania or Albania or whatever.
May I comment about that?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, there's a whole bunch of stuff here. First of all,
yeah,
I want to talk about Armenia and Azerbaijan, but before that, the situation with Iran. You know, there has been a multitude of people in the intelligence and military services of various countries, including the Iranians, but not just them, but Israeli and American and others, said they don't have a nuclear weapons program. They haven't taken this. Now, maybe they're getting closer to doing it now, but I recall but saying they didn't have that. They kept saying they didn't want it. They even had Iranian military people. They went to the Ayatollah Khomeini and said, we need to have this. And he said, no, you can't do that. And then there's this fellow, Martin van Creveld, who's an Israeli historian and strategist, a brilliant man, apparently, you know, and he speaks at something called he's at the Herzliya Institute. I may have mispronounced it, but
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Okay. And he said he couldn't figure out why they weren't getting a nuclear bomb. And there were Israeli specialists that said, you know, we know what would happen. They said they knew what would happen, that if the Iranians had a bomb or two, they said it would cost them a lot of money, it would take a lot of effort, but they would have it just say, leave us alone. He said, despite the propaganda, they're not suicidal, you know, but and Van Creveld says if it was him and he was in charge of the security, you're darn right he'd get one. Yeah. He said, I can't figure out why they're not doing it.
Why does Israel have a nuclear bomb? Because
look how many they've got. Let's go.
Because look at North Korea, and look at these other countries. Look at North Korea versus Iraq. That's why they want to have a nuclear weapon.
Look at Libya. Yeah, look what happened in Libya.
Yeah.
Right, that whole thing. So the whole thing's up. But here's another point that needs to be made, and it ties into the thing with Armenia and Azerbaijan, which our government's foreign policies and ties into what's happening in the Middle East. We have been robbed financially for this. We have been robbed in terms of loss of our freedom and privacy for this. We've been robbed in terms of safety and in terms of American lives in overseas wars on behalf of special interest, foreign and domestic, particularly 2 or 3 from that part of the world. And of course, we know what the most prominent one is, right? It's the Israeli state. But also, you've got, frankly, this neo-Ottoman caliphate that's going to be a rising danger and is a rising danger. And Azerbaijan, which is a name that was stolen for this country that was put together, I think, by the British, the Soviets, and the Turks, that they created this of these Turkic people over here, but also a lot of other ethnicities, including Armenians, including Talish and Lezgin and Dagestanis and all this sort of thing. This is a horrific regime, which is a combination of North Korea, ISIS, and Nazi Germany. This Aliyev family and this Ilham Aliyev is just awful, but he's worked in conjunction with the Israelis and with the Turks and with others, and sometimes even with Russia. So some of these countries, with their statecraft, they'll say, well, how do we might have to work both sides of the fence on some of these.
Turkey does that all the time.
Right. Of these issues. Yeah. And particularly with the Middle East. And this Ali does it too. And also with Ukraine. And of course, then the Ukrainian regime, who done, when these Nazis took over in Ukraine, they did so many terrible things, including working with Azerbaijan and apparently congratulating them on their ethnic expulsion of the Armenians from Armenian Artsakh, which was historically an Armenian area that had been subjected to migration over many years, over centuries, by Turkic peoples. But the Armenians managed to maintain either autonomy, like when they were in the Persian Empire, this area, or they actually got their independence from the Soviet Union and were separate from, they were never part of an independent Azerbaijan until Ilham Aliyev, who was getting money, including from the United States, even though Section 507 of the Freedom Support Act, or is it 907? Anyway, says no money to Azerbaijan until they show that they're not going to act aggressively. But they're getting the U.S. subsidy too, and they went and they attacked these people. But until Aliyev did his aggression, that area was never under control of an independent, internationally recognized Azerbaijan. It was only part of an autonomous of Azerbaijan, Soviet Socialist Republic, and it was made an autonomous part of it, which is not the same thing. But as Americans, we recognize the principles of the Declaration of Independence. And I mentioned this because this is another thing that gets back to this earlier fight. But here in another area, the Azerbaijan, well, this is, they were separatists. Well, so what? First of all, they weren't separatists. I mean, that's a lie to start with. Okay, it's the Azerbaijanis who were separatists, who were trying to separate Artsakh, or it was called then Nagorno-Karabakh, from Armenia. Now, for some reason, the Armenian government didn't say, well, I think they said, look, we should be one country, but they never actually did that. But anyway, they were they bordered each other, and they were together. And these people, the oldest Christian nation in the world, was then subjected to attack by a multinational coalition. And so what happened was, and apparently there were Israeli weapons and Turkish weapons, and even from other countries too. I mean, so it wasn't just that. And also military personnel from Israel were involved in some of these things where they attacked the Armenian people, drove them all out of Artsakh and everything for thousands of years, and was the cultural capital of Armenia. So here's the easternmost, you might say, boundary of Western Christian civilization here, now forced back by this guy. He's horrifically bad to his own people. I mean, it's just an extremely horrible. Yeah, I got regime.
The impression he just is basically just sold out his country to them.
Yeah, well, he's awful. This Aliyev, but Pashinyan, the guy that's the Armenian prime minister, this guy, he's done stuff.
That's who I'm talking about, is Pashinyan.
Oh yeah, well I was talking about Aliyev first of all. Pashinyan, yeah, he seems like he wants to be buddies with Aliyev and Erdogan, and people wonder, was there something going on like with the European Union and the United States saying, hey, you get on our side and buddy up with them, and then we can stick it to Russia, and maybe that's kind of what's been going on here. I mean, but he would have troops on the high ground, and Aliyev would say, get your troops off the high ground, or we're going to, okay, we'll get up. And nobody does that. I mean, it's extraordinary. And now we've got these Armenian leaders from Artsakh, who are civilian leaders doing good work, who are in prisons in Baku, being subjected to show trials, phony kangaroo trials. They're being abused in these prisons. And this Aliyev is there. He's living the life of Riley. It's just disgusting. And unfortunately, the United States government is in the National Guard of Oklahoma. They're involved working with them. This is an outrage, and them and their buddies with Netanyahu and the Israeli government. It's terrific, and people don't understand. I think that the danger that's going to be coming from what they're trying to do is destroy the remnant of the Armenian civilization, which is the only thing between Turkey and Azerbaijan geographically. And then they're going to link up. They're going to try to link up with the people on the other side of I guess it'd be the Caspian Sea, and create this neo-Ottoman caliphate. And it's a danger to Europe. And one of the weapons they've used, of course, has been migration of Turkish workers, right, and others into Europe, into the heart of Europe.
I'm sure Trump thought about all this within these negotiations.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. But also, when he said, "I stopped this fight," no, he didn't.
I stopped 8 wars. Yeah, sure he has.
He didn't stop anything. They were. It's an interregnum, and Aliyev just getting ready for his next attacks. That's all that's going on. Yeah. He's trying to. It's horrific. If people really knew what was going on, they'd be outraged.
Yeah,
I think.
Anyway, hold on real quick, because I want to get this in from a while ago. But Patty mentioned we should let Clay Travis and the Arctic Reporter covering this story know about this news conference tomorrow. Patty, I'll pass that message on to the organizer, and hopefully they can do that. But anyway, again, not to read through this whole thing, but just for one passage that's kind of illustrative. Burden sharing and burden shifting. So we need to get more of our allies to enforce our will around the world, basically is what it's saying. The days of the United States propping up the entire world like Atlas are over. We count among our many allies and partners dozens of wealthy, sophisticated nations that must assume primary responsibility for their regions and contribute far more to our collective defense. And without getting into it, but they're talking about demanding that Japan and South Korea do more to contain China, and we got to do more. Europeans got to chip in more for NATO to check Russia. So the whole narrative that Trump is caving into Russia is just BS. It's basically just saying we have to leave Russia alone for the time being, but what we really want to do is get more of the world to enforce our order. So apart from that, though, but the big thing that's funny about this document, though, is just they absolutely rub Europe's nose in the dirt, and that's just hilarious.
So that might be a silver lining.
Yeah,
I would agree. But
it's too bad. It's too bad European civilization's collapsing, but unfortunately, that's just going to happen because, I have no control over who Europeans elect to be their leaders, but they've made some very bad choices lately.
Well, so. They have for a long time, and we might be guilty of that too from time to time. But
yeah, no kidding.
So I perhaps in this week we could, of course, we could always quote the great Ron Paul, because Ron Paul is right, but also look back to George Washington's farewell address, and he had several things that he warned about, and one was these entangling foreign alliances. Don't have these entangling foreign alliances. And I would say we should get
nothing like that anywhere. Just to read another sentence. As we deepen our partnerships with countries with whom America presently has strong relations, we must look to expand our network in the region. And that's just one paragraph of a million of them. It's all neocon bluster. It's just slightly differing with how precisely the American empire carries itself. But, it's like you mentioned Ron Paul. I saw he just posted recently. Trump had a choice between America, the American people, America first, or the American empire, and he's chosen empire. And
he has done that. So we should remember again. There are so many great documents we can look back to, and the great work of the American Revolutionary Patriots, which we now throw out in the garbage, and it's infuriating. But one of the things that in Washington's farewell address, he warned about these entangling alliances, and he was right. And one of the things he warned about, by the way, we see it in our daily discourse, right? He said people that say, no, we really shouldn't be involved in all this, and we should stop favoring this one group. Oh, you must be biased. And I mean, he couldn't foresee, of course, what the particulars would be. He was thinking about France and England at the time. But of course, we have that. And he said we have unfair attacks on people here at home, accusing them of being disloyal when they're the ones that are actually and being biased, when they're the ones that are being unbiased and are being loyal to everybody else. And instead of putting some people in America in a bad way for this special interest adventure, but also he warned about party passions. He was against having the political parties. That would lead to some really bad things. People would put party first, and liberty and American independence would suffer. And also, if you're going to change the governing structure, he said, do it by amendment, not by fiat.
Here, I got the quote. This is from George Washington's farewell address. Okay. It is our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world. So far mean as we are now at liberty to do it, but let me not be understood as capable of patronizing infidelity to existing engagements. I hold the maxim no less applicable to public than to private affairs, that honesty is always the best policy. I repeat it, therefore, let those engagements be observed in their genuine sense. But in my opinion, it is unnecessary and would be unwise to extend them. In other words, let what treaties we have expire. And
I think he mentions in there somewhere that, from time to time, that there might be a reason why we'd want to be with another country in an alliance against a shared attack from overseas or something like that.
Well, right? Hold on, let me read on here because this is actually pertinent. He said, this is George Washington again, taking care always to keep ourselves by suitable establishments on a respectable defensive posture, we may safely trust to temporary alliances for extraordinary emergencies. But then, hold on, this is kind of funny. Harmony, liberal intercourse with all nations are recommended by policy, humanity, and interest. But even our commercial policy should hold an equal and impartial hand, neither seeking nor granting exclusive favors or preferences, consulting the natural course of things, diffusing and diversifying by gentle means the streams of commerce, but forcing nothing. So, the exact opposite of let's just tariff nations we hate, basically.
Adam, he's singing our song there, and or we're singing his or whatever. But yes, so he was a great man, had great wisdom, and today the people in power would call him a libtard or something else like that.
Oh yeah, well. Very sad, but here we are. All right. I think, guys, that will do it for us for tonight. A reminder, actually, first reminder, hit that like button. Second reminder, tomorrow, 2:45 p.m., Monroe County Courthouse. That's in downtown Monroe, Michigan. Join us to stand in support of protecting women and girls sports. And we will do a show about that either maybe tomorrow, but certainly if not tomorrow, then Tuesday. Dennis, you got anything else you want to promote?
Well, yeah, I guess I guess I would just say I would promote the cause of liberty. I would promote the cause and the concept and the idea that we have our rights granted by our Creator, not by government, and that no one has the right to violate the natural rights of a human being anywhere. And you have those rights and that liberty granted by God wherever you go. Now, you might be in a place that doesn't protect it, but American exceptionalism was really about saying, yes, those are natural rights, those are granted by God, and I think it's particularly appropriate and suitable at this time of the year as we are in Advent and preparing to celebrate the birth of our Savior, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, that we recognize that. And I say, I have and we have no king but Christ, and I thank him for all of our blessings, and I thank the Almighty for those things in the Holy Trinity. And amen to that.
Amen. Dennis, it's been great to have you on, buddy. Good to hear from you. Good to see you. And we'll be in touch. We'll do more streams during the week. So thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. Hope you guys all had a great Turkey Day and looking forward to a great Christmas season as well. So until next time, thanks as always for all you guys do for liberty. And until then, peace.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, everybody.